Upgrades.
Hey, what's going on out there, everybody? This is Sammy Leggy here, representing Team JVS, here to give you guys another movie review straight from Sundance 2023. I'm talking about Magazine Dreams. This is directed by Elijah Bynum and starring the amazing Jonathan Majors. It's got a slew of other actors in it as well. You got Haley Bennett. You've also got Taylor Page. Also Michael O'Haron, who plays Killian's muse, and Brad Vanderhorn. Brad Vanderhorn is a successful bodybuilding champion, and so from Killian Maddox's perspective, he wants to attain this himself. Like, he is devoted to it. 6,000 calories a day, lifting, doing anything possible, including steroids, including letting himself utterly get consumed by this obsession and need to be stronger, perceived as something more than what he thinks people perceive him to be. And I'm just gonna preface it like this. This easily is one of the best performances I've ever seen. Jonathan Majors as Killian Maddox is fantastic. Like, everything about what he's doing. Because the thing about Killian is a man that he is not necessarily a social bug. He does not understand social cues. He very much so is an introvert, but more than that, he's obsessive compulsive. He's dealing with, at times, psychological imbalances. He's dealing with traumatic triggers. He's seeing a therapist, and yet his life, his goal is to be a champion bodybuilder, whatever that means. Whatever he does, that's at the epicenter of it. And it is probably one of the scariest performances as well that I've ever seen, because there's times that this movie feels like a horror movie. It doesn't play like a conventional sports biopic. Like, if this actually is a realistic story, like they did their thing. But from my assumption is that this is authentically created and they wanted to tell a certain narrative, because the thing that is fascinating about Killian, if you really watch, is he is basically destroying his body. He's destroying any essence of social communication, correction of things that he hasn't dealt with. He's got a lot of internal stuff going on, and psychologically, his mental health, it's not good. Like, he is dealing with some serious mental issues. And sometimes that bleed over into anger. Sometimes that comes off as socially awkward. Sometimes uncomfortably close and destructive, and all the three all at once. And how Jonathan Majors goes in and out of showing this amazing physique he was able to put on the screen, and dedication, working out to that level, is insane. But the even crazier thing is the mannerisms, the movements, the non-verbals, like looking at somebody to the side instead of the face, looking down instead of looking up, even if he's bigger than somebody else. Or if somebody, initiates something that kind of agitates him, he tries to do it in a very calm, responsive way, and then immediately explodes. His choice of music, the way that he interacts with his pop, which is his grandfather, versus how he interacts with everybody else in the world. Even when he's actually doing when you actually see Killian posing for some of his contests, you can tell that he's not only overcompensating, but he's doing too much. There's a video there's a well, it's in the actual movie. There's a moment where Killian is doing his own cover video, and this video goes on for about close to 3 hours long, and he just can't get it right because of his obsessive compulsive nature. But really, like, it is scary. Like, it really is insane. What makes this so hard to watch is also the way that they capture every subtle nuance of how his character is shifting and going. Specifically, conversations that he's having with the therapist. The therapist is kind of calling off certain things that we didn't know in context, because the grandfather really isn't talking about anything. Grandfather, you find out, he's been in the war in the past, but he loves his grandson. Like, he believes in his grandson, but his grandson does not believe in himself. And the thing that I found so fascinating, and I don't want to go too deep into this because I don't want to spoil the movie, but every single step of this, Killian is looking at TV. Sometimes he's looking at TV for pleasure, pornography. Sometimes he's looking at it for pleasure, looking at bodybuilders, looking at Brad Vandercourt. Sometimes, like, he's looking at TV and he's not paying attention to the TV, but he's listening to it. And a lot of the time on the TV, when he's not listening to or looking at it directly, there's violence going on. Violence in the neighborhood. There's a black man being racially profiled and looked at a certain kind of way. And what it's doing internally, he's soaking in things, certain things that he's intaking to feed himself, pleasure in himself, right? And the other side of that, the other stuff that he's intaking, is a lot of malice, hate, indifference, bigotry, racial profiling, racial discrimination, and it's literally like a mirror reflecting off of a person. And it's fascinating to actually watch and see it unfold in Jonathan's performance. That's the thing that I found so specific in this movie, because it's not openly talked about. Like, it's not like he's like, this is this. He just opens it up in different ways. He'll maybe say, like, do you ever feel like people looking down on you? That they feel a certain way? And then he acts on those things because he's already wound up. And he's psychologically imbalanced. And it's insane. I know I've been harping on Jonathan Majors this entire time, but he is this film. Like, no question. Everything centers around him. Everything outside of that, like, there are certain social interactions he has with Pop. Those moments were beautiful. Those moments were actually really the meat and potatoes of the first and second act of this film. But there are moments where he interacts with Haley Bennett's character Jesse. That's a very, like, there's a scene with that. It's terrifying. And it's not just because it's socially awkward. It's more than that. There's a lot of things going on. Then there's another moment with Taylor Page's character. I'm not gonna say who she is or what she does. You start to understand, like, what his perception of, like, relationships are in actual physical interactions. Down to, like, his obsession with Brad Vandercourt. Like, there's so many things going on. And at the core of it, there's this boy that never really grew up, and he is this big man that doesn't feel like he's big, doesn't feel like he's heard, and no matter how much he tries, he doesn't feel like he can ever be strong enough. Like, his perception of himself is so low, and anybody that is willing to put him down or put anybody else that he cares about down, he becomes self-destructive. It's an interesting character study. The film itself is kind of like cookie cutter in the sense that I don't know what the central theme is, what they're trying to convey outside of the fact of mental health awareness, outside of the fact of, like, self-destruction when it comes to obsessive compulsive behavior, and also, like, what happens when you don't deal with true trauma. And trauma, not just for a conventional person, but a black person in America. Like, this also dealt with other stuff because of trauma that happened in the past, but also racial profiling. Like, what does that become when you have a person that never really grew up? Like, who are they essentially? There's so many things I want to say. I have a lot of different notes here, and a lot of them I can't even speak on. The one thing that I'll say that's not really a spoiler, but it's the way that Killian accepts his version of the reality. What he thinks will work, what he thinks somebody wants to hear, what he thinks and presumes that somebody else just believe, is so off most of the time. Every time there's a lie, every time he's trying to convey something, it falls flat because he just does not understand like what real perception of a situation is, or even like what is reality at times. Yeah, man, like it's such a strong performance, and so many different things that are good about his character. It's just everything outside of that. Some stuff was unneeded. Some interactions I don't think necessarily were needed. Some stuff kind of went over the top, but there is a continuous build. It's continuously things happening in an evolving door that you're kind of like, there is no good scenario coming out of this one way or another. Like, this is all self-destructive behavior that it cannot be contained. So because it cannot be contained, what is going to happen? And your anticipation is kind of like, it becomes like, initially you're like, okay, this is a drama, sports drama. Oh wait, no, this is a thriller. No wait, this is possibly a horror film. And that is the interesting thing that Elijah does with his directing for this. But the other thing that kind of gets lost in the sauce is what this was for. What was the end resolve for? Why did we take this journey with this character outside of this amazing character study that Jonathan Majors amazingly does? Like, easily Oscar-worthy performance. I rated it at like a 7.5 out of 10. His performance alone is, God, it's just whether or not I would go back to rewatch it. It'd be more so for me to kind of gauge stuff that I missed about who he was than so much more of the actual narrative and where the movie's actually going or flowing. And some stuff, it kind of seems like it's just washed. But there are other situations where one thing that Killian does, there's a ramification to it and it spirals into another. Also, man, like, this is dark. Do know that, like, there is nudity, there's violence, there's suggestive themes, there's sexual assault. Like, there's a lot. It's not for everybody. So I would highly recommend, if you're gonna watch this, do know this is not something you just watch with your significant other or let kids watch. Like, skim through it and watch it first, and then figure out who you feel like you can disclose this kind of content to. So be forewarned with that. Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the bell button. I'll talk to you guys soon. Make sure you let me know what you think in the comment section below. Peace, people.
Filing out the top of the I can see the skyline, 50 mile radius on my timeline. Ain't nothing on my mind. Oh Lord.